Hey, I'm Sean, and welcome to this episode of the podcast. So, we just got through a series of about 5 or 6 maybe episodes in a row where we were just talking about business planning. And it was really fun. We kind of broke down all of the models and tools that I like to use to figure out how I'm going to get where I'm going every year. And if you followed along and actually did the stuff that we were sharing and essentially teaching in the podcast, well, you should have a pretty clear idea of what you need to do this year. Now, coming out of that, I realized there's one area that I didn't really tackle, and that was building a team. So, we talked about lead generation, we talked about personal accountability, we talked about how you manage your time. I'm sure we talked about mindset a whole bunch, and yet for a lot of people, growth gets to a certain point where if they want to continue pushing their business to a higher level, it can't come from them. More leads, more appointments aren't going to make a difference, because if you don't have bandwidth, if you just don't have the time that's needed to actually fulfill, serve, or even just get them to agree to work with you in the first place, you're not going to end up with the results that you need, because you're going to drop the ball somewhere. So at a certain point, we know that if you want to continue growing, if you want to keep doing more than you've done before and seeing what you're capable of, you need to move from being a solopreneur to someone in a leadership role. You need to learn to lead other people. And so I thought it'd be really nice to move from that series onto a series about leadership. And today, what I want to talk about is really what leadership means, when you know you're ready, and what some of the pieces that you should have in place look like in terms of your mindset, your expectations, and the standards that you have, not just for the people that you hire, but for yourself. Okay? So, what does leadership mean? Well, I think a lot of people have this a little bit misconstrued. One of the biggest problems that I often see with people who want to start team building is that they look at their experience in sales and they think that it has any applicability in leadership. I see people do this all the time. They make this assumption that because they were really good at selling properties, they would be really good at building and leading a team. And the problem is that that's not true. The reality is that it is a completely different set of skills. It takes a very different mindset. You need to be, it's weird because it creates a little bit of freedom, but it also constricts the way that you need to operate, because you take on a lot of responsibility, and people won't just know what to do unless you work with them. So it takes a pretty significant shift in the way that you operate typically. And it can be done. Lots of people have successfully made this move, but it takes a bit of a moment where you need to slow down and realize that you need to dig deep and learn before you can push forward and go to the next level. And I think part of that comes from people kind of expecting that team building, hiring, leading people is plug and play. I see a lot of people who, if you're doing it right, usually your first hire is going to be an administrator. And I see a lot of people who will hire an administrator and they'll assume that that person knows everything that they need to know to grow the business. And on one hand, they should come with some experience, some skills, or at the very least be a problem solver, someone who's interested enough and a quick learn that can kind of pick things up and see what you're doing and figure out how to make things better. That's what you want. And at the same time, I see a lot of people who think that they can kind of scuttle the people who they bring into their business in the office, tell them what they want to happen, or give them a set of orders, and then completely disappear. And it doesn't work like that. It doesn't work like that. And I've been referring to this a lot as team building, because that's what this is about. It's about taking the things that you do and creating an ecosystem around yourself so that the business is able to better thrive. But the way that that happens is by that ecosystem not just benefiting you, but benefiting all the people in it. So it's not a plug and play thing. It's actually something where you need to really learn to move from being someone who dictates results to being more like a leader and a coach, right? So you need to slow down and look at the people around you and figure out how you can support them, how you can show them how to problem solve themselves as opposed to just fixing things, and then give them the space and bandwidth to figure it out. And sometimes that means watching them fall down a little bit and knowing that things aren't going to be perfect, but through things getting a little broken and then repaired, they're going to grow back stronger. And I see this all the time. And the more that I lean into this kind of leadership, where I move away from being dictative, where I'm telling them what to do, and I move towards being more just a coach and brainstorming with my teammates about possible solutions, and when things get messed up, knowing that that's just part of the process and that it lets us figure out how to make it stronger and better in the long term, then I find that the results show up. The people on my team are better. They're more invigorated. Like, they want to work, they want to solve things, they want to contribute, and it's more fun. I think one of the other big challenges with leadership is that it also means that you need to be a stronger leader for yourself. And I see this all the time, where people will think that by hiring someone, it gives them a hall pass to not show up at the same level because that other person is going to take some of their slack. And on some levels, that's true, because you have the opportunity to kind of dictate responsibilities and, like, I'm in my sandbox, you're in yours. And at the same time, the strongest leaders are the ones who look at the people that they brought around themselves as an excuse to hold themselves to a higher standard. And I think if you really want to do this, like, you're not just saying, oh, I'm going to hire an assistant or something like that, and they're going to just clean up my mess. And instead, you're saying, like, I actually really want to build something big. Like, I want to build something amazing. If that's your mindset, then I think the most important thing that you can do is focus first and foremost on being the person who is going to attract the kind of people you want around you. If you want people who show up on time every day and push really hard and rah, 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 like, you've got this energy in your office where everyone is just at like a 10 out of 10 in terms of commitment and how they show up, well, that means that you need to be at like a 14 out of 10, because 11 is not going to be enough. Like, you need to push hard if you expect people to show up and contribute at a level like that inside of an organization that you've created. So it's got to start with you. Okay. So once we've kind of cleared the table a little bit, and we've got an idea of, whether this is something, I guess what I would say is, once we've cleared the table and we've got an idea of what we're actually stepping into, that's a better way to phrase it. I think the next thing is to ask ourselves really truly if this is what we want. Because it isn't just some plug and play thing where again, just hire someone and give them a salary and there are some problems that get solved and then you flourish and you don't have to talk to them. It is really like a partnership. You're going to be spending a lot of time and energy doing this if this is what you choose to do. So I think that you need to take a step back before you move forward and ask yourself, like, am I comfortable with bringing this on? And the first thing that you should consider is the fact that it's a lot of responsibility. Taking someone into your business makes you responsible for their livelihood. I will say that I think the mindset shouldn't be indefinite. If you bring someone in and they don't contribute enough that they're more than offsetting what their expense represents to you, then you shouldn't keep them. They should create more momentum than they take. But it's a lot of responsibility. Going back to the way that you yourself need to show up, I think if you're not ready to do that, rather than trying to force it and figure it out along the way, you should kind of take some time to fix your house first. And from there, kind of get the wheels turning a little bit better. The cool thing is if you take on that responsibility, if you say, like, yeah, you know what, actually, I do want this. I'm going to go for it. What's cool is that in some ways it's going to restrict you, because you're going to have to show up like you say you are. You're going to have to do the things that you say you're going to do. You're going to have to be around. You're going to have to force yourself to kind of take pause when there are challenges and really think through what your reactions and the way that you manage it is. You're going to have to be more patient in some ways. But the cool thing is, the other side of the coin is that you get time back. So this kind of structure creates a lot of freedom, because you don't have to go back to the office to do paperwork at the end of the day. You don't have to show the showings on Sunday that you didn't want to do because you had something planned with your family or your friends. So there's this cool trade where you kind of front end load the work of getting things established and setting standards and showing up at a high level, but in return it buys you freedom. And I talk about this a lot, where I say that discipline is actually something that sets you free. If you can really become disciplined, what happens is through discipline, you're so effective in the time that you spend working and building that the time outside of that becomes really clear. And I've seen this in every business that I've built when I really focused on being like really, really, really diligent during the time that I blocked out to contribute to that thing. What happens is all the other stuff that typically interrupts you in the rest of your life gets cleared out. And it's the same exact thing with teams and leadership. The more effective that you are when you're with them, the less that you're going to need to come back and clean stuff up outside of that, and the more time that you'll get back in return. So it's from my perspective, it's a really good trade. So stepping into it, another question that you should ask yourself is, what does my business look like 3 years or 5 years from now? And I think that the people who you choose to bring in right now are going to be a big part of what sets the foundation for that. So I see a lot of people who, when they want to bring in their first team member, the question they ask themselves is, how affordable can I make this? And if you really just want someone to do transaction coordination and kind of like, vacuum the rug on Fridays before they leave the office and turn the dishwasher overnight before they're done, that's fine. Yeah, maybe save some money. But if you want to build something big and you want to really gain momentum, the first people who you bring into your business set the foundation for all the other people who are going to come in. Think about it like this. It's not just their skills, it's not just the way that they show up in terms of their discipline and their commitment. It's also the culture of your business. Are these people who, I don't mean to be one of these jerk employers, but are they people who, if something's on fire on Saturday, are going to pick up their phone and help you out for 5 minutes? Like, do they actually care? And I rarely speak to anyone in my organization outside of business hours. Usually it's them asking me for help with something. At the same time, those little things that if one of them has a fire and I'm able to help them out, or if someone just can't cover something, someone else is going to pitch in, or I'm going to be able to jump in my car and go help. Those little things are what set the culture of the team. Not to mention the way that you all interact, the fact that you kind of care about each other, you have fun, you're building something bigger than yourselves, and you all want the same outcome. So finding people who are in line with where you want to be and where you're going and are the right people to get you there is more important at the beginning than ever, I think. And I'm going to talk more about how to kind of figure that out towards the end of this episode, so stay tuned. I also think that, stepping into this, the last thing that you should look at is like the risk that's involved, the expense, and what kind of burden that represents. Because I think a lot of us look at it and we say, okay, well, there's this risk, like I'm concerned and I'm going to have to put out all this money. And I do think it's important to step into it in a place where you actually know where that money is going to come from. So it's not something that you need to worry about having ready for that person. And at the same time, I also think it's really important that that person's salary isn't necessarily guaranteed for a really long time. So I usually bring people in with a 90-day mindset. I'll say, I need to see that this is going to at least offset itself plus some in the first 90 days. And it doesn't need to be that the cash is in my pocket in the first 90 days, but I need to see some numbers that are trending in a way that I know this is a good investment. And the flip side of that is what it gives you is it gives you that extra productivity. So you take on that burden, you take on that risk, and then in exchange, what happens is the wheels start turning and your business can grow to the next level. So how do you know when it's time? That's a huge question. I think a lot of people want to build a team because they get into real estate and teams look cool because the people who own teams are the ones who have all the listings at the office meeting, or they have the nicest cars. And I think a lot of people start too early and a lot of people wait too long. So there's kind of this sweet spot. And I think it mostly has to do with bandwidth. When you're looking at bringing people in, it shouldn't be because there's a couple people who are at the office that you enjoy hanging out with that seem to have free time that you think would be fun to like share a space with. We see a lot of teams like this that operate not because they're on a mission together, not because they're all really in alignment. It's not anything to do with values. It's literally just them being like, hey, like this guy's credit card is covering a bunch of stuff. And like, if I happen to mistakenly do some business, it would be nice to have someone do the transaction coordination because I'm so lazy. I can't imagine doing anything at all. And we'll just see what happens. What it really should come from is you being at a point in your momentum where you either are failing to serve clients that you're bringing in at the level you want to serve them because you have so many clients who are demanding your time, or you can see that you're growing like on trajectory that you're not going to have the bandwidth to do all the stuff you need to maintain growth. So when you bring people in, it needs to be something where you look around you and you say, I'm going here, and if I don't bring someone in to back me up, it's going to dive. It's not going to go in the same direction that it's pointed right now, and I want to maintain that direction. And I think another reason that a lot of people should really be honest with themselves and look at truthfully is burnout. So maybe it's not about your trajectory. Maybe it's not about client load. Maybe you are doing enough business that you're happy and you're satisfied, and your lifestyle sucks. I see some people who, like, it's insane how much business they write. They write, $800,000 of commission, $1 million of commission, and it's one person. I met someone the other day who did $2+ million of commission with just them and an assistant. And his assistant was very dedicated. He was very dedicated, and hats off. Amazing, amazing person. I couldn't believe the things he told me when I interviewed him. And at the same time, I see a lot of people who get to a certain point and they just grind and grind and grind, and they never put anything in place to support themselves. And what happens is it leads to burnout, like in terms of your energy. It can burn out your relationships, and most often it burns out people's health. We see a lot of these top producers who are like just ragged because all they do is work 10 hours a day, 7 days a week, and they never have a break because they always say yes. So I think really looking at where you're at in terms of the way that you use your time, where your momentum's at, and just being really honest with yourself and knowing that it's okay to need some support, and bringing it in based on that. So I think when you're looking at your business, it's usually going to be one of these things, and there's also kind of a sweet spot to bring people in. And what I've found is that you see some people who get up to 600,000 or 700,000 in commissions, and I find that if they don't already have an assistant by that point, and they continue to grow just because they're good and they're getting referrals and their clients love them and all that stuff, I find what happens is they actually kind of get trapped. Remember when I said that before you bring someone in, especially when they're first starting with you, we'll talk about this in a future episode, you need to be more predictable and consistent yourself. You need to show up for them. And especially with an operations person, actually with anyone, you need to have time, preset times that you meet with them, you lead them, you support them. If you're not doing that, what happens is they're not going to have the tools they need to thrive. And so if you're doing $700,000, $800,000, $900,000 of business, and then you bring someone in, you're not going to be able to give them what they need to give you what you need. So you could have the best hire in the world, but they might not be able to fix the problems that you have because you're not talking to them. So the sweet spot to me is somewhere between $300,000 and $400,000 of personal production. Now, I'm a softie. I don't want to work hard. I don't want to work 12 hours a day. I think having time to think and slow down and focus on projects and the things that drive long-term growth are really important in business. And I'm a big, big, big believer in having time freedom. Like I want that counterbalance where I have time with my family, I have time for myself, and I have time for my business. And so that's why I say 300,000 to 500,000. You can totally push this if you aren't in alignment with those values. But between 300,000 and 500,000, you're still going to be at a place where any capable and disciplined person is going to be able to get that business done and still have time left to help to find the right person, and then to help the right person get started. And also remembering that you need to grow yourself as well. Because again, leadership is not sales. You need to build this new muscle. You need to learn how to do this stuff. Otherwise, you're going to screw it up. I promise you. Okay. So at this point, You've thought through really what it's going to mean. You've asked yourself if it's what you want. You've kind of looked at your business and said, like, is this the time to do this? And right now what you need to do is you need to stop for a second. You need to ask yourself if the problem that you're having, this challenge with bandwidth, you need to stop and ask yourself, is this something that I could fix with a system or technology? Because people will be the best investment you can make in your business. And at the same time, if you're in momentary pain because your business got really busy and you're dropping the ball on a couple things, but you could plug in some better systems to manage yourself, or you could plug in some technology that would solve that problem, you might not need to go hire someone, especially if in the, the leader is leadership what you want section, where we were talking about like the responsibility versus the freedom, the risk and burden versus the growth and the future potential of the whole thing. If you were scratching your head at that, well, you might not need to do it just because you're feeling overwhelmed. You might be able to, again, fix the systems you're using in your business and use that as a way to get past the hump that you're in. Okay, so once you've asked yourself that, could tech or systems solve this? The next thing that you need to do before you get started, and this is really the last step before you start putting a plan together to hire someone, is you need to understand what the vision for the business is yourself before you bring other people in. Jack Welch, considered one of the greatest CEOs of all time, when asked what he did, he said that all he did was relentlessly and continually cast the vision. You need to know so clearly where you're going, what you're doing, and be able to articulate it and share it with people that they without a moment's hesitation would be able to say the same exact words you said in alignment with where you're going. So stop and figure out what that is. It doesn't need to be 500 agents spread across the continent making $10 million a year in commission. It could be really simple. It could be, I want to have 3 or 4 really great people that help me serve my buyers and sellers, and I want to have a small but really talented administrative team. Okay, so it doesn't need to be anything. It could be whatever you want, but what's important is that you know what you're doing, where you're going. And I love this concept from a really great book called Start With Why, Simon Sinek. And he talks about how most people focus on what they're going to do and how they're going to do it, but they don't actually talk about why they're going to do it. And he uses this example of Apple computers, right? Like back in the day, we had, Dell and IBM, they were the leaders of the race. And when they put out advertisements, what they were doing was they were talking about the how and the what. We've got great systems for quality. We have fast machines. Buy our computers. We're selling computers. And Apple flipped it. They moved to why. They said, everything that we do to push the status quo. We're here to change the way technology works and give you beautiful products that integrate with your life and draw you closer to your passions. And by the way, if you're wondering what we do, we make computers and technology stuff that you can hold in your pocket. But don't worry about that. We're here to change the world. And that kind of message was so captivating that it completely changed the landscape of technology. And today they're one of the most profitable companies ever to have existed. So figure out what the why is behind your doing this. And it can't be just that you're at bandwidth. If you're at bandwidth, the why is probably about sharing some of the opportunity you've created to help other people elevate their business. It's not something that is just there to serve you, because if that's what your why is, guess what? You're never going to find people who are loyal, who want to push you and grow this thing. And I shouldn't say you can't do that. You can. It's just that if you do, it's going to suck. And if by contrast, instead you said, you know what? My vision is to create a business that's big enough for all the amazing people I find to create a business as big as they want inside of it, so we can all thrive and grow together. You're going to attract better talent. So find a way to create a vision that's so in alignment with where you and the people you want to be with are going, that it wouldn't make sense for them to consider anything else. So I'm going to leave you here. Take some time and just kind of ponder what you want, if it's right, And then as we continue, I'm going to take you through the steps that I go through every time I hire someone, and we'll talk about the structure of bringing people into your world, helping them get what they want, and through that, you getting to go where you're going. I hope you enjoyed this. If you have questions, I'd love to answer them, so feel free to drop comments or reach out to us. And as always, I'm really grateful that you took the time to spend with me. Thanks for watching.